Welcome. It's December 19th, 2024. It's right before it's a Thursday, right before market open, the Thursday after the big FOMC meeting. And obviously we had a huge down day. Let's just get right into it. We're gonna go through our 20 or so tickers. But this is what we've been talking about, that the Fed meeting would be a pivotal moment, and the direction seems to clearly be down. Let's start with SPY and let's look at the daily. So yesterday was day 31. And just like, let's zoom in here. Look at the size of this candle, right? This is your Wednesday candle, FOMC meeting. This right here is your Tuesday candle. So the candle yesterday was a big bearish outside candle because we made a higher high. At one point, we were green on the day above this high here. That's why we have this wick here. And then we just flushed, obviously, at 2 o'clock after the Fed announcement. But notice, we still haven't closed the gap here. And we're bouncing today, which is excellent because you would expect that there would be a little bounce before we continue lower, right? Like, so think of it like something like this: get a little bounce, and then boom, test the bottom. That maybe another bounce. And then you imagine we keep going lower, and we have a really specific target. Actually, it's we'll switch over to the monthly chart. This is what we would expect. Now, it's entirely possible that this also is a daily cycle low here on day 31. We'll have to watch for clues, and we'll be able to see that on lower time frames. But equally important, we this was week 19, and we now have a very clear swing high, making the week before last. So the week of December, the first week of December, basically, that becomes your high for the weekly cycle on week 17. Now think about that. It's very, very likely that we are now in weekly cycle decline. The only question becomes, how long will this weekly cycle decline last, right? Like, I would expect we at least get something like this next week, right? Something like that. Now, look at the monthly candle. This is where I think you get your biggest kind of clue. The same way, let's go back to that daily candle for a second. The same way this daily candle made a higher high and then made a massive lower low, this monthly candle has made a slight higher high above this one. It's the same exact pattern. It's except here this is on the higher time frame. And so the expectation is that this candle fills out, and we obviously have not that many trading days to go. And so what you might see is what I would call a compound, what they call a compound outside candle. So you don't finish it on the time frame that you're on. So let's say this monthly candle, maybe we continue down a little bit lower, but it doesn't quite make a lower low. We then maybe see continuation in January, right? Like, to kind of close the deal, right? Like, so that we make that lower low below this, and so that these two candles become an outside candle of these two candles, right? Making a higher high and a lower low. So now it's really a question of how severe the weekly cycle decline is going to be. Is it going to make that lower low on this monthly chart? At this point, it seems likely. And just to take a step back, the reason, like, the Fed, people were expecting the Fed to say they were going to cut 3 times next year. Instead, they said they're probably only going to cut 2 times. So people interpreted that pretty bearishly. This is the little bounce we talked about. We'll just look at the futures really quickly, since again the market hasn't opened yet. You can see we have a big bearish, a big. So notice the futures actually didn't make a bearish outside candle and never made a higher high. That's because it started trading, much earlier, obviously. But we're now just inside the range of this gigantic candle here. It's a nice solid green candle so far, but look at look at, like, we could be in this for many days, right? And just kind of chop around, like, so not necessarily super bearish, but I would expect that we're going to make that lower low. So that's SPY. That's the level that so just to be clear, on the monthly chart, that level, let's go back to SPY. On the monthly chart, that gives us a target of 568. And even if we got that, looking at the weekly chart, that would get us to, like, right around here. That still doesn't erode this uptrend, right? It doesn't make this, like, I would say this larger uptrend here. So ultimately, it's a question of how, like, is it going to be a quote unquote healthy weekly cycle decline? So that's SPY. Let's go to QQQ real quick. So QQQ much weaker. Well, so interesting. It was actually stronger, but now there's like a catch-up trade to the downside, if you will. So QQQ actually made a higher high this week, so week 19, whereas SPY's higher high came on week 17. And notice, I hope you're noticing the pattern here, right? This is a bearish outside candle now for the week. We obviously haven't closed the week yet, but this is going to close as an outside candle. It's just a question of is it gonna be red or is it gonna be green? I mean, we'd have to make a crazy upside move for this to close green. So most likely it is gonna close red, which is a harbinger for this monthly candle. Look at this shooter here that we have, right? Again, that concept of a compound outside bearish candle, that's what you might see for January, right? And again, we're getting a bounce today, and which is perfect because if we're starting a downtrend, you would expect there to be lower highs, and so that's what we want to watch for. So that's the cues. IWM was already leading to the downside, so IWM confirmed the swing high back in the first week of December, right? Whereas QQQ obviously went on to make a higher high. So that's been signaling weakness for a little while, actually. And remember this consolidation box? Well, hello. Let's just extend that bad boy, right? Like, look, we're now back in it, basically, right? We've fallen back into the box. And there's a long way down to the bottom. That doesn't mean we get all the way down here. But this one is weak. Like, if you wanted to be aggressive in terms of shorts, IWM is probably one of your candidates. The Dow, also, similar thing. Look at that. It's confirmed the swing high on the second week of December, so the week of December 9th. And so those are the weaker ones. Let's see, what does that look right? Like if you look at the monthly candle, right? Is that a higher high? 451. Yeah, yep. So it made a slight higher high this month, and now it's going to make a lower low. I think it's very, very likely. So that's below 416, like 416.19, right? So so that's like another $10 of downside from here. I mean, it would be a pretty crazy miracle for it to avoid making a lower low here. So in some ways, the Dow and IWM are kind of leading the other indices. Let's go to SMH. What is that one looking like? We have been talking about how this is, my goodness, look at the monthly. Let's look at the monthly first. Look at this. Oh, wow. Look at these wicks. I mean, man, tough to be long here. This thing is just like, wow. I mean, this is a crazy looking chart. Like for the last 3 months, monthly candles to look like this. If we zoom into the weekly, yeah, you can see it's just kind of like trading side by side, like kind of like a barcode. That's rough. But like zooming in, what is the pattern we see again, folks? This is on track to make a bearish outside weekly candle. That's a move below 238.37. So that's the level to watch for SMH. Dixie has reversed, my friends. So Dixie on the weekly chart had made a swing high. Look at that. That line, boom. It closes a swing high. Like, oh, maybe your top is week 8. And then it said, no, that's not the case. It did make another lower low that next week. But then look at that. Whoop, whoop. Now we've made a higher high, actually. So this is week 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So now our new high is week 12. Now, the bright spot, or I should say the thing to keep in mind here is we're not early in the weekly cycle. Like week 12 is getting later. So although we just made another higher high, you're definitely going to get a top in a few weeks, you would imagine. So just not like, I don't know that there are many, many, many more weeks of upside left here is the idea. That's Dixie. And if you look at the daily chart, what are we looking at? So on a daily level, we're on day 9. So you can kind of think about it in those terms. Like how long of a daily rally are we going to get? This one was 13 days. This one was 21. So far, we're on day 9 for Dixie. What about the 10-year? Same thing. They've been moving in unison, basically, the Dixie and the 10-year yield. And you can see here, wait, is that right? What's the count on this thing? This to this. Oh, it's actually 13. So higher high on week 13, so kind of leading the Dixie. And so that means something like TBT should be working. Yes, look at that thing. looking to make a higher high. I like it. And on the monthly chart, about to make a higher high, a higher high, like above, this ugly shooter candle, which means we're headed towards 30. What is that? 37.50 at least. Like once you get above here, then you're possibly going to come retest this. Now remember, this is a leveraged one, so careful. So that's TBT, excuse me, which is correlated with the U.S. 10-year, but TLT, which is the inverse of TBT for the most part. I posted about this. This thing is clearly in daily cycle decline. I mean, look at this. Wow. The only thing I would say is a bounce should be coming soon. Like you'd have to imagine a bounce at least soon. But on the weekly level, here's the really bad thing. We had like really short 2-week rally, and now we're already starting the weekly cycle decline, which means we could drop for a lot of weeks. Because the last weekly cycle was 30 weeks, the one before that 26, the one before that 34. So these things tend to be kind of long, and we're on week 4 here, and we're already declining. So it's actually a pretty good short. Let's move on to crypto. Look at Bitcoin. So that didn't like the news about the rate cuts either. Yesterday had a big red day. So far, to be very clear, we're sitting below a swing high now on Bitcoin. So that's below 105,337. Now, we are trying to reverse here. We made a little lower low, and we're trying to come back. Let's look at the weekly. Where do we stand? Again, these things have been rallying for a little while. So it's week 19. You got to be at some point looking for an ICH here. So I would be cautious here. And I think ETH is probably in a similar boat. Yeah, very similar boat. I would be cautious here, kind of like week 19. 19 weeks is a long rally. It's not. So that's really consistent with the idea that, yeah, stocks go into a weekly cycle low. Makes sense that crypto would as well. What's happening with the metals? So this is gold. Look at that. Top on week 21. This looked like a nice little short weekly cycle decline, but we got this big red candle, or excuse me, green candle here, swing low. But since then, we've just consolidated inside that range. So you really can't get too excited until we break down below there, which we're pretty close to doing now. So that's like, what is that? And this is gold, spot gold. That's 25.62 as a level. And on silver, if you look at this is, I mean, my goodness, definitely leading to the downside here. We've already made a lower low. It's week 19. So my read on this is we're declining into a weekly cycle low that we could get in like week 27, 28. So if you like scenario plan that, that means we could be declining into, what is that? The middle of February. That's the bearish scenario. And I don't see why we couldn't see that. GDX is going to probably follow silver. Look, they're doing the same thing. Look at that lower low on the weekly. Yikes. So for GDX, this is a little murky. It's like, is this possibly a new weekly cycle and now we're just starting to decline? I would follow the silver weekly cycle. That seems to be the most clear one. And that's telling us, again, going back to that, it's telling us that we probably have another 7 to 8 weeks of downside. I know that sounds painful, but that's just what you might expect based on previous cycles. Looking really quickly at palladium, yikes, same deal. I mean, these charts look kind of identical. Look at that really ugly lower low. So you want to watch for a move above that. That signals a false breakdown. If playing for a bullish reversal, that's what you would need to see, right? Yeah. Platinum did the same thing. It managed to close green though, which unlike the others, but still nothing I would get excited about. And finally, let's look at natural gas. How is this thing doing? Okay, we're moving. This is looking like this was a long-term cycle bottom, and so that would put us in month 9 of a new long-term cycle. I mean, look at this one, rallied for 25 months, 26 months. So natural gas is finally looking like a buy. Now that said, it looks like it's probably a little late in the daily and weekly cycle, and as you have equities coming down, Not the time that I would jump into a volatile asset like this, but it looks like long term where it's starting to work. So we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for watching.